opinion, there is something in the air in November that makes it the best time for watching period dramas. Is it the crisp air, the cozy aesthetic, or the remoteness of the early darkening sky? I don't know. It's both endearing and a little isolating, which I think is something that can be translated into the very essence of the period drama. So in this vein, I've spent the last week unemployed and cooped up in my room watching a slew of period dramas. And so whilst I have no one that wants to hear the extended ramblings of this in my real life, YouTube will have to hear it instead. The first movie I watched was The Banshees of Inshirin, so immediately you know that I'm lying to you because I had to go to the cinema to go watch this. It's a film set in the 1900s in rural Ireland about two friends, Colm and Patrick. Honestly, I'm not sure how they've made the most Irish name more Irish, but they've done it somehow. But basically, one day, Colm decides that he no longer wants to be friends with Patrick because he thinks that he'll be wasting away his life if he stays friends with Patrick. The film brings Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson back with Martin McDonagh to make a new film after In Bruges that is both incredibly funny and incredibly confusing. It's an incredibly intense film that you honestly will not be able to gauge where it is going at any point. I love the setting and I think friendship is an incredible theme in a film. I love watching movies about friends. I do think it's a fun watch that I readily recommend. The next thing I watched was a show called The Empress on Netflix. I was immediately just captured by the teaser, so nothing about the merits of this was the reason I watched it. I just thought it looked pretty from those teasers they run on Netflix, and they got me, you know? They were like, we're gonna make a beautiful period drama, and they were like, yeah, we know exactly whom to market this to. It's about an empress, and I genuinely didn't know which empress it was about until I started watching it. I was under the impression that it was a Russian empress, and then I realised, oh no, they're in Austria, so no, an Austrian empress. It's very classic in its approach. It's a royal period drama. It doesn't really have anything else going. It's like she's a royal, but she's a girl boss. And I'm like, yeah, I've watched this before and I'll watch it again. It's beautiful. My favorite thing about it is that if you know anything about history, you know that this is the family that starts the World War. So it's her son that is essentially the reason that the World War starts. So nothing about Austria is particularly that interesting, but that is an interesting fact. The Austrian Empire, it's had its days. Get Franz Ferdinand getting shot in the head, kind of iconic. Then I watched Cyrano, which is the Joe Wright film from 2021. It's a musical, and I wasn't expecting that going in. I fully thought it was just like a normal period drama about Cyrano de Bergerac. Yes. No, it's the adaptation of the musical about Cyrano, which I don't think I really vibed with. It has Peter Dinklage and Hayley Bennett, who I like from other things, but this film really didn't bring any of it together. I just think it was really long, and there was something about it that just didn't click with me. I didn't like the way it was shot. I didn't particularly like the story. The dialogue was weird. The musical elements were so random. The only thing that I can really say about this film that was good, and honestly it's the main thing many people say about this film that was good, and that is the costuming is quite nice. Her dresses are really good, and his soldier uniform is quite good, but honestly, apart from that, I can't think of anything that was particularly amazing about this film. And then I moved on to watching Their Finest, which is a period drama set during the World War, second one, and about a copywriter who gets hired to write a movie that is basically war propaganda. She wants to tell a female-driven war propaganda story because she is a girl boss. You know, girl bossing the war, guys. Love that. And honestly, it's a sweet film. You know, it has some romance and it has some girl bossing in the 1940s. I think the most interesting thing about it is just the way it shows how Hollywood tackles true stories. So when she starts writing the film, she wants to tell it exactly how it happened, and then it just becomes more and more skewed as the producers and the director decide that the story that she wanted to tell wasn't actually very interesting, and they made it much more action driven. But I do understand, since film has always been a profit driven industry. Then I watched two very similar films about two iconic girl bosses, and that is Rosaline on Hulu and Enola Holmes on Netflix. And Rosaline is about Rosaline from Romeo and Juliet, who's obviously the Capulet that Romeo likes at first, and she's a girl boss, obviously, because of course she is. And her whole thing is that she doesn't want to have any suitors. She wants to be a map maker. She speaks her mind. I really like this genre where they just make period dramas funny. I do like it. I am definitely the intended audience. A lot of people really dislike this type of genre, but for me, I'm here for it. I do find it funny that they always have to be a girl boss though. I understand that this is for a younger audience, so it's meant to be like empowering to like younger women or something. But sometimes they don't have to be a girl boss. Rosalind is really funny, it's a good film, it's a good time, it's like a family-esque movie. It's for younger girls. It's definitely like that audience, 14-year-old girls. good time. Caitlin Dever is the main character, and I love Caitlin Dever. One of the best actresses of our generation, honestly. Love seeing her in things. She kills in this. She's awesome, as always. And the love interest in this movie is really hot. So, it has something going for it. It's easy to watch, and it's easy to get to. Like, it's on streaming basically everywhere. It's on Disney Plus if you're not in America. And then Enola Holmes 2. I think it's better than the first one, actually. It's really interesting. And you already know all the characters, so there's not like loads of exposition. Kind of get reminded of everything that happened in the first one if you haven't watched that one recently. And like Millie Bobby Brown is like overacting as hell, but it's fun. Like, it's a children's movie, so you get why they're doing that. The only problem I think with this movie, but obviously again it's a children's detective movie, is that you can't figure out anything by yourself. It's like all of the clues that she finds are so long-winded that you have to wait for Enola to tell you what's happening. She'll look at a map and she'll find like a cipher in it, and you're like, okay, but like no one could have got this unless, and I get that it's meant to be telling us exactly how clever she is, and that's great, but you really don't get any sort of problem solving yourself. She's the one telling you how to engage with the clues. Something I loved about the last one and this one is I love the editing of the Enola Holmes films. I love all of the illustrations they put in, the collages, the drawings, the pictures, any sort of map, the visualization of the clues, everything about like the editing is really nice. Quite a long movie. I think it's like 2.5 hours, which is really long for a children's movie, I think. But it's paced really well, so I think you kind of get through it and it's quite fun all the way through. So I think it's really easy to engage with the entire way through. Then I watched another new film, which is My Policeman, the new Harry Styles film. Honestly, kind of iconic of him to have 2 films where he's bad back to back. Honestly, I don't think he's that bad in this, or Don't Worry Darling. I people hate the way he acts, and I'm like, maybe it's just because I definitely think he should have just been side characters until he could have got a bigger role. He should have taken much more of a Justin Timberlake approach. So this movie is about a couple and this friend that they make. It alternates between the past and the future, and how the future is essentially dealing them from the fallout of what happened in the past. It's not that resonant with me. It's not an incredible story. It feels a little awkward. It's a queer film, and Harry Styles plays a queer person in the film. And I find that because of that, something about him playing a queer person in this film made the sex scenes so weird to me. I just feel like it's because it's Harry Styles, something about it just wasn't clicking for me. I feel like if it was any other actor, I would have been fine with it. But like Harry Styles and queer sex scenes, just entire time I was like, oh my god, the Larry stans are gonna. I just couldn't stop thinking about the Larry stans. They were just gonna be insane about this. The only real good thing I can say about this is that it's a pretty movie. It's quite good. It's got good cinematography. I think it's bright and nice to look at, but other than that, I don't really care. Honestly, it would be better off without Harry Styles. Like, I feel like everyone is so focused on Harry Styles that you can't really look at the film objectively. At least I couldn't. I think it's like a mid film without him, and it's kind of like, it's a mid film with him, and it could have been a decent film without him. And then I watched Interview with a Vampire. I actually watched the show first, which I think is a little bit blasphemous, but let's talk about the movie first. I did not like this as much as I should have. The movie, the 1994 movie, it should have been right up my street, Vampires in the future, vampires in the past, the passage of time from the past to the future with vampires in it, that should have been right up my alley. I did not like this film. I don't know what about this film I don't like. I just don't like it. I just don't think it's very interesting. It's Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt, both people I really like to watch on screen. They're weird people in real life, but I don't know, I just didn't like this film. And then I watched Interview with a Vampire. I watched the TV show before I watched the film, actually, which I actually think maybe is a bit blasphemous. The TV show just ended. The entire first season is out, so if you haven't seen that, go watch that. But I'm going to start talking about the film first. I did not like the film that much, okay? I don't know why I didn't. It should have been right up my alley. Vampires in the past, vampires in the future, the passage of time between the present and the past. That's really what I like in a movie, but I just didn't like this movie that much. I don't know why. I just think it felt really stilted to me. I don't know if it's the direction. It looks great. I do think it's a very pretty movie, and the acting is incredible. I did not realise that Kirsten Dunst was a child actor, but she's really good in this movie. All of them are really good in this movie. I just don't like this film that much. I don't know if it's the pacing that really screws with my head. Just not for me personally. I really like the show though. If you don't know what Interview with the Vampire is about, it's about a vampire who gives an interview about his life since he got turned into a vampire to present day. I think I like the show. It's more gay. It's more, the main character is black in the movie, and New Orleans is interesting in the past, and I think Black New Orleans is more interesting even. I think the main thing that I love about it is just the fascinating relationship dynamics. There's Lestat, who is the vampire that creates the other two vampires. There's Louis, who is with Lestat. And then there's Claudia, who is kind of their child type, protege type. And I will say, Anne Rice is going to hate all of the fujoshis who are here to write new fan fiction about the show Interview with a Vampire. And Rice, you're looking up from hell and you're gonna hate it. I'm sorry, my queen. And then I watched some period dramas that I would say are a little bit more dark academia-y, you know? Not really, but a little bit more. I started with a bit more of a weak dark academia-y film, and that was A Room with a View, which is not really a dark academia-y. It's a movie adapted from E.M. Forrester's book, A Room with a View, and it's about rich people going on holiday and then coming home with problems. And I feel like it's such a common story. Like, I feel like there's always a part in an old book, especially if it's just kind of a contemporary book for the time. They just go on holiday. They go on tour, because that's what they call it when they go on holiday. Back in the day, they were like, oh, we're going on tour. And it's like, you're going on holiday. Just call it holiday. And they would come back, and they would come back with all of these problems. It's an incredibly stacked cast, though, I will say that. Like, it's Helena Bonham Carter, Maggie Smith, the guy who plays Lestrade on BBC's Sherlock, and Daniel Day-Lewis is in this movie. Yes, that's cast. Good acting. It looks really nice. Really good compositions. I feel like that's the main thing about this film. Like, I feel like everything looks nice. I'm pretty sure this was shot in film because it's like an old ass movie. But I feel like the way everything is shot is really nice. I will say about that. But it's not that interesting. I'm not gonna lie. This period drama is boring as hell. Like, the relationship in this, which is obviously the main part of this, is just not fun. Nothing about this is fun. I'm so sorry. I would not recommend watching this film. And then I kind of watched the dark academia film, because I've never watched it, and that is Kill Your Darlings, the classic of classics, you know? I don't know whether or not this is a film that I should have watched when I was like 15 years old, because I used to be like obsessed with Dane DeHaan after Amazing Spider-Man 2 came out, and I also, you know, I loved Harry Potter, so Radcliffe was obviously like one of my faves, but I just don't like this movie as much as I probably would have. I think the movie's beginning is very dark academia. I understand why it is. The entire aesthetic is very dark academia because it is set in Colombia in the past, so it has all of like the sort of aesthetics, clothing wise, and just sort of being in Colombia, you know, red brick, IVs, has the whole thing going for it. The beginning is entirely about kind of being like enraptured with studying and literature and humanities. Basically, the academia part of dark academia really shines through in the beginning, and then we get to the dark part of the academia, and I feel like sometimes it really works, sometimes it really doesn't, and I don't think it really works here. It kind of derails into this dark part, and it's just not very interesting when it gets to the point where we understand that there's been a murder and we have to kind of solve the murder and save the person who's murdered, and you're like, I don't really care. Going back to like the pretty aesthetics and the full-time vibes, I'm gonna end talking about Kill Your Darlings with saying that I never understand why in these movies everyone loves Byron. Everyone's like, and Byron did this and Byron did that. If you're a real literature student, you'll know that the best romantic poet is John Keats, and that's why the next movie I watched was Bright Star. Bright Star is a Jane Campion film about John Keats, and it is moody, it is long, it is contemplative, despairing, passionate. It's a really beautiful film. It's just great, good film. It has the vibe of The Outside right now. You know, November, I told you about how much of a period drama month it is. You look outside and you watch Bright Star and it's exactly the same. It's so immersive in this time of the year. You know, it feels really sad because John Keats just lives a sad life. If you know anything about John Keats, you know how sad he was, and everything that happened to him was just so sad because he's a sad boy, okay? He's a sad boy who writes poetry, okay? And that's why he's the best romantic poet, okay? You read his poems and you're like, oh, he was so sad. And you're like, exactly, and I'm sad too, so now I'm going to read John Keats, okay? If you've never read a John Keats poem, I highly recommend reading a John Keats poem. You're probably going to need to have spark notes up with it because he writes like a dickhead. Because he writes like he was born in the 1800s because he was. But you're going to have to thank me because at least it's better than Coleridge. And then I watched Indignation, which is a movie about a Jewish student who starts at the school to kind of defer going to the Korean War. That's actually why he gets allowed to go to uni by his parents. And it's about sexual repression, loneliness, and a lot of anti-Semitism that happens in institutions like universities. It's an interesting and nuanced portrayal of anti-Semitism. I think that's like an interesting reason why you should watch this. I don't really see a lot of movies that show kind of like the covert anti-Semitism that a lot of people face. There's one scene that you really see it in this movie, and I highly recommend just for that one scene, because I think anti-Semitism as a whole, you see it as kind of like massive. I feel like people think that people who are anti-Semitic are very outward about it. There's actually a lot of covert ideas of anti-Semitism just like in society, and you can really see it in this film, and I think that's a really interesting part of this film, and I would say just watch, like literally watch it just for that. And Logan Lerman is in this movie and he's really good. I will say, having a nuts parent, like a parent who's just kind of nuts, is just part of the vibe that dark academia movies have. Like the same thing happens in Kill Your Darlings. Like, your parents have to be nuts if you're part of a dark academia aesthetic. You heard it here first, babes. It's set at a uni, so it definitely has dark academia vibes, and it is very sad. So again, dark academia vibes, if you want that, I would definitely recommend this film. Logan Lerman is in it. He's very pretty in this movie, and that's probably reason enough to watch it. And then I watched my favourite film that I watched over the last 2 weeks, and that is Mona Lisa's Smile. I feel like most movies about dark academia are about men, and seeing this movie about women is really interesting to me. This movie is about women going to a very prestigious women's college in the 50s. It's got an incredible cast. Julia Roberts is the rest of the main cast's art professor. So the rest of the cast are Julie Stiles, Jennifer Goodwin, Kirsten Dunst, Maggie Gyllenhaal. Kristen Rittenhouse is also in this movie, which is like an extra, which I think is funny. But yeah, it's a great film. And essentially it's talking about how women go to uni to become good conversationalists and to learn about culture rather than for their lives, and kind of how that should change, and how autonomy should be given to women, and women should reach out to try and like get jobs. Obviously this is like very white centric, but it's the idea that women who are educated should be told to pursue jobs to kind of grant them more autonomy in their world, because otherwise, you know, how can they get that, especially as sort of like rich women whose entire lives are dictated to be housewives. The film kind of really explores female companionship and friendship, secret societies, exploring sort of sexual freedom, which is a massive part of the film. And it's really about moving out of the mold set for white women in this time. And to me, that's like a really endearing aspect of the film. And I highly recommend this film. I gave this film like a 4.5 stars. Like, I loved this film. The only thing I didn't like was the love interest, but like, let's not talk about that. That's like the ending is great anyway. So yeah, those are all the period dramas I watched. I watched so many because, again, November is the time for it. I highly recommend, if you haven't started watching any period dramas in November, you need to start doing that. The thing about November that brings out the integral sense of a period drama, you know, something deep within a period drama is rooted out by November. You can really feel it harder in November than you can feel it in any other month. So yeah, thanks for listening to me ramble on about all these movies. I recommend most of them, and if I don't recommend them, I told you not to watch them, okay? Watch them at your own peril and form your own opinions.